Today, we are reviewing the live-action Snow White movie starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot. This movie has been contentious for a long time. I think most of film YouTube has been looking forward to this release just because it's been so controversial between Rachel Zegler's comments and Gal Gadot's acting. This movie has been getting it left and right. Oh, not to mention also the lack of actual little people as the dwarves, and they've got little people mad at the movie too. So like everyone across the political spectrum is angry at this film. They're boycotting this film. I am going to go over briefly how it's doing at the box office before we get into the review because that sets up the context for everything that I thought this movie did wrong. And I thought I would break this review down into 7 mistakes that I thought Disney made just to tie it into the Snow White brandness, I guess. But anyway, so I have 7 mistakes that I thought this movie made, that I thought Disney made in making this movie, and why I think it's these mistakes that make it not a good film and not something that I would recommend. So yes, spoiler alert up front, did not enjoy this movie. This was not a movie that I would recommend you take really anyone to go see. Even kids, I think, would be bored. Because at the end of the day, the movie is just not interesting, and there are several reasons why I think it's not interesting. But before we get into the review, I do want to say hi to some of the people in the chat. Hi Rodney, hi Natanya, hi Sketch9, hi Alexander, hi Will, hi Fake Mustache, hi Cheetah Viper, hi Rob, hi Freelex, hi Elegance, hi DeBoy, hi Cream Cheese, hi Dylan, hi Natanya. I think I said Natanya. Thank you to each and every one of you who's in my chat. I appreciate you guys being here each and every day. Hi Nicholas. So yeah, I have a lot to say about this movie, so let's just get straight into it. Since you guys have been waiting so patiently. Thank you. I know I was late, but I had to put some things together. So let's start again, like I said, with the box office news. So Snow White opened with only 87.3 million worldwide, which is really not good. I mean, we've been talking about how they've been trying to lowball the budget, which almost no one believes. They've been saying it's 180 million when we know that it has to be a lot more than that because of the reshoots. So some people are saying the budget's over 200 million. Some people are saying the budget's actually over like 300 million. So we don't know how much this movie cost exactly, but we do know that it was extremely expensive. And it only opened to 87.3 million worldwide. This is not the domestic opening. This is worldwide. So that is quite bad. I'm seeing a lot of yikes and oofs in the chat. Yeah, yikes indeed. This is career ending for somebody. Honestly, I think a lot of the heat's going to come down on Rachel Zegler, but I think she's not even the worst thing about this movie. I honestly think that the executives in charge who made the creative decisions that put together this movie need to be the one that honestly pay the most for how poorly this movie is about to do. Because make no mistake, they're going to lose like hundreds of millions of dollars on this movie. This isn't just a flop. I would put this so far, unless this has like a miraculous turnaround, I'd put this squarely into like bomb territory. This is really bad. Honestly, I think this will not just hurt the actors' careers. I think this will also hurt the Disney brand. Just because they made so many mistakes that I feel like audiences and fans like me we need to see a lot of changes to the company and how they make movies so that we can trust that their movies will actually be good and they know how to deliver what we actually want. Because watching this movie, I didn't get the sense that they understood what fans want to see at all. I felt like more like they were trying to make a movie they thought people wanted to see without actually knowing what it is people wanted to see. And it's just it's honestly strange what they came up with, honestly. Arvin says, I hope this movie ends Gal Gadot's career. Maybe. I think both of these actresses are going to take a hit from this. I really do. Will says, as someone who loves Gal in a lot of movies, she was horribly miscast. Yeah, I think they're both miscast. I'm going to talk about that in my review. Vincent says, well, Disney shut down due to this box office bomb. No, they still make a ton of money from like their theme parks and stuff. But I do think that they should, this should make them rethink how they go about making these live action remakes, and maybe we'll see some differences in the future. But let's keep going, because I have a lot to get to in my review. So like the audience reaction is not good, critic reaction is not good. It's got a B+ cinema score, which is the lowest cinema score for any Disney live action movie to date, which means audiences disliked this movie more than Mufasa, more than Maleficent 2. That movie's awful, y'all. How did I don't even understand how that movie got an A. That movie is truly terrible. This did better than Little Mermaid. I mean, it did worse than Little Mermaid, worse than Beauty and the Beast. Worse, or it's on par with Haunted Mansion, which I also did not like Haunted Mansion. And honestly, I didn't like Haunted Mansion for a lot of the same reasons I didn't like this movie, as I'm about to go over. So, no one's really liking this film. It doesn't really seem like it's going to turn around in the second week. I mean, anything's possible. Look at Mufasa, but I just don't think that's going to happen here because the movie's just so toxic, and honestly, it's not interesting. I would even say Mufasa is like more engaging of a movie than this one. Like, this one is just truly, truly dull in every sense of the word. And I'm going to go into my 7 reasons why in a minute. But is anyone surprised by these audience reactions? Who has actually seen the movie in my chat, and what did you think of it? Before I get into my review. Oh, Vincent says the Snow White remake is one of the worst ever. I think it's definitely one of the most uninspired and lackluster. I would agree with that. Oh, Arvin said this movie was much better than Mulan. That's a good point. Mulan never went to theaters, so it wasn't cinema tested, but honestly, I think Mulan might be the only movie here I think is actually genuinely worse than Snow White, because Mulan was terrible. Wait, Mulan and Maleficent too. So none of you were expecting more. A lot of you don't even want to support this movie. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people just do not want to support this film for one reason or another. They hate Disney, or they're mad with Disney, or they don't like the actors involved. There's a lot going on with this film. So let's get into my review and talk about what I actually think about it. So, as I said previously, I went into this movie with expectations that, honestly, they were very low. From all of the controversy surrounding this film, I really thought that the main issue I was going to have was Rachel Zegler. I'm just being honest. I thought she would be the main problem because she's been kind of the main problem so far. I mean, from her comments about how much she didn't like the original and her attitude early on in the press tour, I do think she's tried to change now, but I think these comments are so damaging that they still live on to this day. I just kind of thought she would be the main problem, and she is one of the problems, do not get me wrong, but there's so much else wrong with this movie, and it's also just generally a really dull, boring movie that there are other issues with it other than Rachel Zegler. I would say one of the only positives in this entire film is that Rachel Zegler can sing. She can sing. There's no doubt about that. She has pipes, okay? That is maybe the one positive I can say about this movie. But everything else, I just have nothing positive to say, and here's why. So what are my issues with this movie? So number 1, the first mistake, modernizing the story. I understand that the original Snow White is very old, and that means maybe trying to update some things. But how they tried to update things actually made the story worse and more uninteresting, and let me explain why. So let's start with Snow White as a character, how she was in the original animated film. So in that film, Snow White is depicted as very soft, childlike, innocent, naive. Her biggest flaws are that she's so childlike and innocent that she's willing to trust a random stranger who gives her an apple, or just random stranger she meets in a cottage in the middle of the woods. Like, that's her flaw. That's like the main thing that Snow White has like going against her as a person. But otherwise, she's like a beautiful human being inside and out. But her main characteristics, I would say, are like very demure and innocent. That's how Snow White has always been depicted, or at least in the original film. What they decided to do in this, like this live action version instead, is instead of Snow White being like this sort of innocent, demure, childlike character, they changed that into she's a nice, like keyword here, very nice, kind human being who just like wants to do right by the kingdom and the people who live in it. And I felt like that was a really boring change to her character because suddenly she has no more flaws. She's perfect. The only flaw this character has, this version of Snow White has, is that everyone else doesn't realize how perfect she is and how kind she is. And she just needs to the main crux of the movie is that like the queen and the other villagers in the town and the guards and everything just need to wake up to how kind she is and like how she's right about everything. And like that's so boring. That's so boring. Like it makes her character so boring that she's just nice. Like that's literally like the main personality trait that they give her is that she's just nice. And I felt like instead of making that the moral of the story, they should have gone back to what the original character was, which is like this sort of very naive person, and maybe make the moral of the story having Snow White try to mature a bit and wake up to the realities of the world and try to get over that. I feel like that would have been a much more interesting way to go with her character while still updating it but keeping it true to the original instead of turning her into this like be kind activist person, which is what they turn her into this movie. And I think not only is it nothing like the original character, but I also think it's a very drab personality trait to give her. I mean, who wants to be just the nice girl? You know what I mean? That's the only personality trait they give her is that she's kind, which is just like super, super boring. And not on top of that, they took out Someday My Prince Will Come because, you know, they wanted to update the whole story around her not wanting to, wish for a prince, essentially. So instead, they gave her this, like, anthem song where she's, like, really singing from her chest, her guts, her full, deep voice. And she's singing lines like, so will she rise or bow her head? Will she lead or just be led? Is she the girl she always said she'd be? So we went from Snow White kind of being lonely, wishing for some romance in her life, to now singing this full-chested, belty song about, can I be the leader that I always knew that I could be? Like, we're talking, like, very on the nose, like, modernization, like, trends here. Very, very, like, I would describe this movie as woke. Like, I definitely think Disney is moving beyond that now, especially post-2024 election. But I do think this movie was made in a time when they thought, like, that was more popular than it is. And you can tell. It's like textbook woke. It just is. It really, really is. And even down to, like, how she sings. For example, this is actually going to go into my second point here, which is that I thought the actors are miscast. Like, horribly miscast. And that's even with thinking Rachel Zegler has a really good voice, but she just doesn't have the right voice for Snow White. Listen to how Snow White sounds in the original movie for people who probably haven't watched it in a long time.
Well, that's all you have to do.
Very high, very operatic, very sweet.
Your wish will soon come true.
Very, like, classic, okay? And then listen to how she sounds when they give her her Big Girl Boss anthem song. Very different voice. Alright, that's it. But you can just tell the difference in the voice from, like, this very sweet, like, operatic, opera kind of like, you know, that very childlike but very like high voice to this very like deep-throated, full belting, like much more mature and adult sounding voice that I just, again, I think they chose the wrong kind of actress with the wrong kind of voice for this role. I think if they truly wanted to modernize this more like demure, almost ditzy like character, they should have made Snow White like Galinda. They should have Galindified the character. And I feel like this was the correct route to go with Snow White rather than this traditional, like, almost homely. I say homely because the haircut. But like this, like, homely girl boss kind of trope that they turned Snow White into. And I feel like if they had made her like they casted an actress kind of like Ariana Grande who had the ability to hit these operatic tones and have this sweet kind of like demure disposition, but can still be portrayed as smart on top of that. So that's how you update it. I feel like that would have been much better received than the type of version that they go with Snow White in this. I mean, literally at the end of the movie, she decides to lead a rebellion against the evil queen by just like walking into the village up to the castle and essentially demanding she stand down, and it like works for her. Like she faces no like consequences, she faces no like challenge whatsoever. She just like walks up with like her like girl boss stare and is like, you better stop it. And the Snow White, I mean, to her credit, the queen is like, no, but the guards, they listen to Snow White just because she happens to remember their names. And like that's how she's able to like turn the guards against the queen. And that's literally it. That's all she has to do. It's like suddenly everyone remembered, oh yeah, Snow White's amazing, so we just have to do what she says. And that's so not interesting, so boring, so like not the character whatsoever. But I think they casted Rachel Zegler because I think from conception, they probably wanted to go for this more like activist Snow White role, and they were like, oh wow, Rachel Zegler's perfect for that. But that's just so not the character, and I think that makes the character less interesting, which makes the movie less interesting. And I really feel like the Galindified version of Snow White would have been a lot more accurate to the source material, but also updating it for the modern era. That's how I feel about Rachel Zegler. We're about to go into why I think Gal Gadot is also miscast. But before we get into that, I do want to get your thoughts on this. What are your thoughts on how the casting was for Snow White? Yeah, Mitchell says he fell asleep around some point. I told you guys in my out of theater review that I saw this with my mom. And she fell asleep a couple of times in this movie. Like, it's really, really dull. Because a lot of it is the main character, Snow White, is just a very dull character. They made her like as bland as possible to be like as palatable and non-hateable as possible, which just made her like really uninteresting. Yeah, I see most of you agree this is a bad choice. Rob says Snow White marches. Wait, what is Snow White marches with like all women behind her, an army of midwives or whatever. Yeah, I also feel like you can tell that this movie had like another version where the rebellion aspect was a stronger part of the story, but then I think they scaled that back after all the backlash. But I do think you can tell that at one point that was going to be a bigger thing because it just felt like that scene had more to it that we were just not aware of. Because it didn't really make sense, like, at all. I feel like the song that Rachel actually sings here is not even bad. It's just does not fit this character, and I also feel like Disney has been giving like almost every Disney princess this same similar kind of song. Like this kind of sounds like Let It Go. This kind of sounds like all the places I'll go. This kind of sounds like even that Wish song that Asha sings. Like, Disney keeps giving a lot of their Disney princesses the same, like, belty I Want song, and it's getting old, and it doesn't even fit like every princess, and that's why I actually don't like this song in this movie. Even though if this was given to like a different princess like 10 years ago, I probably would have liked it. But now I'm just kind of over these songs, and I just don't think it fits. Sorry about that. But yes, also Gal Gadot, terrible casting. I mean, do I need to say more? Like, she cannot act. And I really, really like the first Wonder Woman. In fact, I would say the first Wonder Woman movie is one of my all-time favorite superhero films, like ever. Like, easily top 10 for me. And I really like her in that movie. I actually think she's good in that movie. I mean, I know a lot of people were complaining about her acting then, but I thought she was, like, okay in that film. I really did. Even in Wonder Woman 2, I thought Wonder Woman 2 was absolutely ass cheeks, but I thought Gal Gadot wasn't the worst part of that movie. However, for this film, I think she's so miscast and does not know what to do with her face, her body, her emotions, or her lines. That she is just so clearly lost in every single scene that she's in that it doesn't even look like she's having fun. Like, I thought going into this that I would say, like, oh, at least, like, it looked like Gal Gadot was having fun. But no, I don't even think she was having fun. Like, I feel like I could watch her on camera think about how she should say a line, how she should move, how she should even, like, curl her hand. Like, nothing about it felt natural to her. It all felt like she had to really think about it. And she still chose the wrong choice. Like, it's the song, this still here is from her song, the villain song, comically bad. I mean, she's really hamming it up. I've been doing a lot of community theater lately, as you guys know, and this is like community theater level acting, and not even like good community theater acting, because I've worked with some people who are actually pretty good actors, even as amateurs. This is like really bad community theater acting. Like, just so bad. Like, it's actually, like, there were only about 8 other people in my audience. Like, the theater was not sold out, not even close. And I could still hear people laugh at her. That's how bad she was. Like, there was just certain line readings where it was like, really? That's what you went with? That's the best she did? That's what you decided to put in this movie, which means that's the best take you got? I mean, it was just shocking. I mean, not shocking because I kind of knew she was a bad actress, but I didn't know, like, she could be this bad. Like, I almost blame the director partially because I'm like, they should have told her. They should have told her, like, hey, maybe do something else. Hey, maybe tone it down a little bit. Hey, maybe take some acting classes. Like, I feel like there was more that could have been done to help her and support her. So, like, I don't even think it's just her that dropped the ball here. I think it's multiple people. I mean, do you guys remember Charlize Theron and that Snow White and the Huntsman movie? Like, how cool she was? And, like, how she actually, for a little while after this movie came out, even had, like, a moment in pop culture where, like, people really, like, connected with this take on the evil queen and how, like, smoldering and even kind of hot she was. Like, Charlize Theron was exactly the kind of actress you should have casted in this role, not Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot is no Charlize Theron. Like, acting-wise, not even close. I feel like they could have gone with so many other people that would have been better in this role than Gal Gadot, who just really, truly, positively cannot act to save her life. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like she really needs to take some acting classes, because I think the thing that will hurt her the most from this movie is not even how poorly the box office is doing, because I think a lot of people are going to blame Rachel Zegler for that. But I do think people are going to blame her for how bad she is in this movie, and I think that will hurt her getting roles in the future just from this performance. It's really that awful. But did anyone who saw this movie, did you also laugh at her lines? What did you think of her acting choices in this movie? Wicked just says Gal needs to stop. She does. I think at this point she's become the internet's favorite punching bag. Everyone knows she can't act. If I were her, I would take a break after this, like a long one. Oh yeah, Lana Parrilla. She was so great once upon a time. I would have even had her instead. Vincent Hall says the evil queen is sympathetic. This is why I prefer the evil queen over the girl boss for Lord Farquaad. I don't even know if they made her sympathetic. Like, she's just kind of like a very one-dimensional stock villain that has like no depth. Even the villain isn't interesting. That's why at the end of the day I just felt like this movie was really dull, because even the villain wasn't interesting. I mean, how is your main character and your villain both uninteresting? It just makes for a super dull movie. And the villain song itself also wasn't great. The music was done by the same team that did the music for The Greatest Showman. And you can actually kind of tell, because I think the Waiting on a Wish song kind of sounds like that song that, Never Enough from The Greatest Showman. But I think the music in The Greatest Showman is a lot better than this. I don't think the actors are the right ones to do these songs. I don't think that they're the right songs for this kind of property. The music in this just overall didn't work for me. I didn't really like care for any of the new songs, especially the big group Village songs. I thought those were all really bad too. But moving on, because we have a lot to go over. So a third thing that I had a problem with was just the general lack of romance in this movie. And I'm not even just talking about the lack of romance between her and the should-be prince character, who's not even a prince in this movie. He's like a bandit who she just happens to find in the woods. He's almost like Flynn Rider. He's even kind of dressed like Flynn Rider, with the hair kind of like Flynn Rider. He's not even a prince. He's not like Prince Philip in the original at all. Like, at all. They changed his character entirely for this movie, again, to modernize him. And first of all, he doesn't look like he exists in a fantasy world. He has iPhone face. I think this actor is actually really good. I thought he was, in fact, this character was one of my favorite characters in the whole film, just because I liked this actor. However, I also think he has iPhone face and doesn't look like he belongs in the world of Snow White. So I never believed him in that universe at all. And when I say lack of romance, I'm not even just talking about the relationship. I'm also talking about, like, the beauty and romance of the film and the artistry of it. Like, in the original movie, there were, like, lots of quiet moments where Snow White would just be talking to her animals, or looking around at the gorgeous scenery around her, or just, like, taking in a moment with, like, whimsical, charming music in the background. There's, like, none of that in this. There's no whimsy, there's no charm, there's no, like, quiet moment where Snow White gets to marvel at the fact that all these animals come to her. There's nothing like that. There's nothing, not a single thing in this movie that inspires, like, childlike wonder, which is what these Disney movies are supposed to do. That's where the magic comes from. And this movie just has, like, no magic because there's no romance. Everything is just like, let's get on to the next scene, let's move on, let's hit these beats, let's get these things done that we're supposed to, and move on. There's no, like, time to, like, revel in the magic and the artistry of, like, what's even happening. So, like, that also keeps the stakes really low, because you're just like, well, we're gonna move on to the next thing, so we're not even gonna, like, really process this. And the two also have, like, no chemistry whatsoever. Like, they have more, like, brother-sisterly energy than they have actual romantic energy. I never once believed that these two characters actually loved each other. In fact, they felt like they barely knew each other because they fall in love so quickly, which is a thing in Disney movies. But usually, like, they have their meet cute in a way where, like, you already like them together. There's none of that in this. None. Like, I get the feeling, like, as soon as the camera cuts, these two actors are on their phone, they're talking to someone else, they're not even, like, engaging with each other. Not that they don't like each other, but they just, like, it's strong friend energy is what I'm saying. So, like, now you have a bland princess, a bland villain who can't act, and they also play down the romance between the two, the two actors here, and they have no chemistry. So are you seeing now why this movie turned out to be extremely bland and boring? Not even, like, a fun bad to watch, but, like, just extremely bland. So that's another thing. And then number 4, poor visuals. I thought the movie also looked quite bad visually, and you guys know that visuals are really important to me, and I think they're important to the story, and also just, like, making the theatrical experience worth it. I mean, Avatar, the whole reason why the Avatar movies are so successful is because they are a visual treat for the eyes. I feel like Hollywood needs to like lean into James Cameron's aesthetic more and like really emphasize having lush visuals for the audience to enjoy, because that was not in this movie whatsoever. In fact, I use this picture here because that's how a large part of these wood scenes look like. Whenever she's outside of the cottage, it's like Rachel Zegler, who's a real human, and then everything else around her is animated. Like to the point where it was like Jungle Book level quality. Sorry, except Jungle Book actually looked better. When I say Jungle Book quality, I mean like in the sense that Mowgli was the only real human in the whole movie and everything else was animated. For a large part of this movie, Rachel Zegler is like the only real thing on screen and everything else is animated. It's hard to even call this live action when so much of it is animated, from the animals to the forest to the trees to like even this weird sort of glossy sheen that's over it. And I really do feel like that takes you out from being able to like fully immerse yourself in this movie because it just looks so digital and artificial. And I don't think AI was used in this, or at least I don't know. But honestly, as I was watching this movie, it made me think of like how I don't think AI films will ever fully take off, because as soon as you can tell something looks fake and artificial, it's like your brain just like immediately disengages from it. And that's what happened to me. Like I just immediately disengaged because I was like, nothing that I'm looking at is real here. And I think even Rachel Zegler is like not a good enough actress to react to nothing and sell that, because I felt like she had no chemistry with the dwarves either. And speaking of the dwarves, they also look terrible. Like the CGI on them was uncanny valley to the max. Like truly, truly awful. I never got used to them. It wasn't like they were weird at first, but then I got used to it. No, I never got used to it. Particularly Dopey. He looks like the stuff from Nightmares. Every time they showed his face, I was like, can you not, please? I mean, they tried to give him some sort of sympathetic arc where, like, you know, Dopey doesn't speak, but in the very end, he does. And it's like a big surprise. And, like, that could have been sweet if this character looked at any at all believably real. Instead, he just looks like nightmare fuel straight from like the Polar Express, but like worse because he has weird cartoonish features. It's all of them look this bad the entire movie. I don't understand why they didn't just hire like actual little people for these roles, because I think it would have made this movie so much better. In fact, I would even argue, despite how terrible, like truly terrible the dwarves look, they had some of the best scenes in the movie. Like the whistle while you work scene where they're like, you know, whistling while they're working in the cottage. That was my favorite scene in the whole movie, just because it had just a hint of that Disney charm. And that was like the only scene we got it in the whole movie. But imagine if those were like real people. You know what I mean? And like Dopey was like a real person and not just like whatever this is. I think it would have made all those scenes hit even harder. And because all these dwarves are CGI, they're like hardly in the movie. Like they don't really get much story or background. They're like kind of put in the back burner a lot of the times. They're like barely part of the story where they're supposed to be a huge part of it. And so I also feel like that was a mistake as well. Like, why did you put the dwarves in the back burner? Oh yeah, probably because they're CGI and it would be too expensive to have them in too much of the movie, which is a mistake. They should have just had real actors play these roles, not turning them into like CGI monstrosities. That just makes no sense. But again, I just don't understand how like there are executives who watch these movies before they're released, can see a shot like this and go, yes, this is releasable. Yes, this is what the people want to see. I just don't understand. At this point, I really do feel like it's getting to the point where we need to like get rid of these executives. I was actually doing like a fun thought experiment last night. Like, what would I do to fix Hollywood? Like, how would I make movies better? And I honestly would set up a system where you could have more crowd-funded movies So, like, if a director or an actor, whoever wants to get a movie done, all they have to do is, like, pitch the idea on some sort of, like, crowdfunding platform. And if they get enough fans that are interested and reach a certain, like, threshold of money, then they can go ahead and make the movie or something. Like, I truly feel like we need to, like, fully democratize and decentralize Hollywood to the point where executives have, like, almost no say on what to greenlight anymore, because I have lost trust in most executives in Hollywood being able to know what to do. Because, like, how do you look at this frame, this creepy character, and say, yes, this is releasable, this is fine? Like, do you even watch your own movies? Is this something you would want to watch if you weren't attached to it? Like, I feel like more executives need to be asking this question. Because if the answer is no, don't do it. Why would you do this? Why would you subject this onto us? This looks worse than the Polar Express, in my opinion. And I love the Polar Express. But I know that animation style is dated because it was new at that time. This is not new anymore. So Disney has no excuse. But anyway, I really feel like we gotta get rid of the executives because I don't trust any of them to know what to do anymore. Because, like, who said this looks good? Who? Fake Mustache says this is worse than Sebastian from the live action Little Mermaid. I think you're right. I think you're right about that. Fake Mustache says this worse than Sebastian. Oh yeah, I already read that. Du Bois says, I'm kind of surprised after directors haven't taken to platforms like Kickstarter for stuff like that. Name big directors would totally be able to get a sizable amount from that. Yeah, I don't know. I saw, like, a couple weeks ago, I think it was James Cameron and some other big Hollywood director. I can't remember who. I think was it Quentin Tarantino? I don't think so, but it was James Cameron and some other big director. They were talking about how the state of the industry is really bad right now. And I'm like, you have a lot of money. You could be greenlighting stuff and making stuff yourself, but you don't want to risk your own money. But you want the studios to risk money. Why don't you actually, like, put your money where your mouth is and make this stuff yourself? That's kind of where I feel like we need to go. Stop depending on these studios and just, like, make our own content. Because these, I don't know. I just, at this point, I don't know what else to do at this point. Yes, Bob Iger is very much out of touch. That is true. He needs to go. And I used to like Bob Iger, but not anymore. But anyway, let's keep going. So I also wanted to talk about the costumes. Do you guys remember, if some of you might have been here when I reviewed the Marvels, and how I really didn't like the costumes in the Marvels because I thought they looked cheap. I thought they looked like costumes and not just like actual clothes people were wearing. And I thought it looked like they were all manufactured made, which in this time period, you would not be able to buy like a leather pleated vest from the Gap. You know what I mean? Like, but that's how everyone looks in this. Do you guys remember this image of the hippies or whatever, the bandits? They're in the movie, they're actually bandits. So they're actually, it's worse than that. They're former actors who have been displaced and out of work because of what the queen has been doing. So now they're forced to become bandits and steal to survive. So that's who these characters are. I know, crazy. But look at their costumes. This is how almost all of the characters are dressed. And these weird sort of mixed-matched, but also like tailor-made and manufactured clothes that just looked awful. They look truly awful. They don't even look like they're part of a real fantasy village. They look like they're costumes meant for community theater actors to wear and like a YMCA. You know what I mean? Like stuff that partially stuff they got from Amazon, partially stuff that they bought from, they got from their closet, and they just like put together something and tried to make fantasy costumes out of what they had. That's what this looks like, but that's also how like every character in this movie looks. I don't even like Snow White's dress, to be honest. Like, I feel like all the costumes are a miss, a chop. After seeing Wicked and seeing what they're able to do with those fantasy costumes, like, that is the bar. And they didn't even come close to that bar. Like, Wicked did fantasy costumes so much better, and the set too. Which actually goes to my next problem, number 5, is that they did not shoot on location. A lot of the scenes in this movie look like they were shot on a sound stage, especially any of the shots outside of the cottage. It made the movie feel very small. It made the world feel very small because so much of it looked like they were filming on sets. And all I could think about while I was watching the movie was The Princess Bride. And like how that movie filmed on location and it looked gorgeous. Like just seeing that rolling hills in the background and like the big wide shots of the village or whatever. Like it's that stuff that really sells you and immerses you in the movie and brings that romance that I was talking about earlier. And there's just none of it. There is just none of it in this movie. In fact, it's all just very small, very closed feeling because there's so many sets involved. It just feels like, in fact, I kept thinking of the show Merlin. I don't know how many of you guys have watched the TV show Merlin, like came on in like the early 2010s. This show reminded me of the same production quality of Merlin, which is not a knock towards Merlin because I thought that was actually they did pretty well for a TV show, but I'm saying this in the sense that Snow White does not feel cinematic. It kind of felt like a TV show at times because of how small it felt and how much some of the sets really felt like sets. So it didn't even have like a cinematic feel to it. Like, honestly, I thought Merlin did it better. So that was another issue. Like, imagine if they had gone the Princess Bride route and they had Rachel Zegler out in the beautiful green rolling hillside and they had like a real cottage out there. I just think I would have added so much depth and richness to the movie, like visually and texturally, that I think it would have at least made the movie more interesting to look at. Because even looking at it, it just looks very dull. I mean, look at this. This shot didn't end up making it into the movie. It's in the trailer. But I think it's a very good indication, a very good showcase of how dull this movie is shot. Because like, even the way it's directed, it's like the most uninteresting camera angles, the most uninteresting like camera placements and wide shots and angles. Like it's even shot like very basically, like they're just trying to get the scene done and that's all they care about. Like there's just no like artistry here. And that was again a large part of why I thought it was really dull. And then number 6, the corporate mandates. Yes, there were corporate mandates. So as you guys know, I used to work at Disney World, and I had a roommate that actually worked at Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. So I got to go on this ride a lot when I worked at Disney because my roommate would just let me go through the Fast Pass line back when they had Fast Pass. I like this ride. It's extremely short. I wouldn't go on it if I didn't have a Fast Pass, but it's a good ride. But there was even a point in this movie where they had the dwarves go on a mine train adventure just randomly. That it's not even like explained why they're there or like why this has any relevance to the movie. It's literally just there to promote this ride. Like you could tell that's what it was because even the carts kind of look similar. And the whole time I was just thinking like, yeah, we get it, Disney. You want us to go ride that like 2-second ride in the middle of Magic Kingdom. Like I get it. But it just felt, again, part of why this movie felt extremely corporate to me. Just extremely, like, made by committee. You could tell when they were, like, executives had their hand in the kitchen trying to affect certain things and change certain things and add certain things. And this was just one of those scenes in the movie where I was just like, oh my gosh. I just know on a whiteboard somewhere in Disney there was need mine train sequence. Because that's the only reason that was in the film. It just completely stood out in a bad way because there's like no other reason for why there needs to be a Minecraft or mine sequence at all other than they just want to promote the ride. And again, it just adds to like why this movie feels so lackluster and dull and corporate. It's because it is. It's because it is. It's because of all of these decisions and choices that I've said so far. And lastly, again, the movie is just truly, truly dull in every sense of the word. For all these reasons, but also just because it's like you could tell it wasn't made with any passion. I don't think Mark Webb made this because he's a Snow White fan. I think he made this because Disney gave him an opportunity and he saw an opportunity for a paycheck. That's how this movie feels like for everyone. It's just a paycheck. It's a paycheck for Gal Gadot, who looks painfully awkward every time she's on screen. It's a paycheck for Rachel Zegler, who does not look like she's actually interested in the Snow White character, but interested in portraying what she thinks the Snow White character should be. Like, I don't even think her acting is, like, that great in this movie, to be honest. Like, I feel like she was always, like, showing you what she thought Snow White was rather than just being Snow White. Like, it just all felt very showy and not in a good way. It just all felt like very corporate, made by committee, dull. Let's just get to the next thing. There's no like one moment in this movie where it's like, oh, I could tell someone really like went out of their way to like really make this great. Like, it was just all kind of like so by the books. So let's just get to the next scene. Let's just hit these beats that we know we have to. There was no passion or love in this movie at all. No magic, no warmth, no romance. That's why my mom fell asleep several times. Because it's just truly an uninteresting movie. That's its worst flaw out of all the things that I've said. It's just truly an uninteresting movie. In like every sense of the word. For all the drama that's around this movie, I actually think the drama is more interesting than the film itself. Like, that's how dull it is to me. And for that reason, I give this movie a 4 out of 5. I couldn't even give it a 5 out of 5. I mean, it's not out of 5. Oh my god, I just realized. Hold on, let me change this, because it's not out of 5. It's out of 10. I just realized I said this is out of 10, which is not true. Or out of 5. Hold on. Let me redo that. Sorry. Which is why I had to give this movie a 4 out of 10. Because it's truly, truly just not great. The only redeeming qualities is there's that one whistle while you work scene, which is the most accurate scene from the original source material. So, not surprising, I thought that was the best scene. I thought that Rachel Zegler has a nice voice, which is nice to listen to, even though I don't think it's the right voice for the role. And, like, it's not Quantumania. Like, it's not, like, overtly offensive in how bad it is. It's just extremely corporate and dull, which is why I give it a 4 out of 10. So that's how I feel about this movie. That's how I feel about Snow White. I think there was a lot of missed opportunities. I think this could have been a really good movie if another director was involved with another cast. And maybe another studio, honestly. I think Disney is also a huge problem here. But yeah, that's how I feel about this movie. What are your thoughts on anything that I've said so far? What are your takes on this? I know I said 4 out of 5. That was a mistake. I meant 4 out of 10. I changed it. You guys are laughing at my 4 out of 5. Focus! Give me questions and comments. I know I made a mistake. Disney is having an identity crisis. It is! I really feel like this movie could have been better if they had hired someone who could actually exude innocence and demureness like the original Snow White. Again, I think the Glinda version of Snow White was like the way to modernize and update that character. I think if they had cast someone like an Ariana type, I think that would have been better. I think, I don't know, I think that if they had shot in like a real location, if they had used real actors instead of CGI dwarves, if Gal Gadot wasn't in the movie, if Like, there's just so many things. If they actually made the love interest interesting and, like, they had chemistry together and it was more of a focus in the movie, and they included the Someday My Prince Will Come song, I think that was a mistake to cut that as well. I think you can even have updated that into, instead of it being like, oh, the only thing that she wants is a husband, that's all she wishes for. It could have been updated to like, oh, Snow White's really lonely. She's alone in this cottage with a bunch of strangers, and she's dreaming of having someone, to love and to take, have someone like take care of her and like hold and stuff, which is a deeply relatable thing for all people. Imagine if they kept that scene and that's how they updated the context of it. Just being like, oh, she wishes for a romantic partner to not be so lonely at night. Like, with the loneliness crisis that exists in the world today, I think that would have really resonated with a lot of people. And I think that would have given that song a new meaning without having to cut it and make it seem like, oh, it was a bad song, when it's literally one of Disney's most iconic. So I think there was all the ways that they tried to update and modernize this character in this movie, I think were the wrong choices. I think they overthought it, particularly when it comes to the dwarves. And I think in the end it wound up being like an extremely boring film that I think everyone will forget about like in like a couple weeks. Honestly, it's just not interesting. It's just like a very bland movie. The most interesting thing in it is Gal Gadot's campy acting, but that's a bad thing. Arvin says, I hate the old hag look, and I was so disappointed by that transition. Yeah, the transition into Gal Gadot turning into the old, ugly old woman. I thought that transition could have been done better. And I also wish that she had stayed in that state longer. Like, she was only that old woman for a very short part of the movie, basically just to give the apple, and that was it. Rodney says, Disney ain't never touching Pocahontas in live action, that's for sure. Yeah, I wouldn't even want Disney to do Pocahontas at this point, because there's no way that they could make that movie with how their company is currently situated. They would make every bad choice just like they did in this one. Prototype says, Disney only listens to the opinions of other people when the opinions align with their own. That's very true. I think Disney has a very big problem of, they think that like everyone agrees with them and people who don't are just in the minority, which I think they really need to wake up and realize that is just not true. Spinlock says, I don't want Disney to remake anything more at this point. Well, they're going to. And to be fair, I think the Stitch live action remake looks really good, largely because it does look accurate to the source material. So we'll see. We'll see. Maybe if that movie does really well, like I think it will, maybe they'll use that as their model instead, which I think is a good thing. Yeah, I think it's honestly a miracle that movies like Pocahontas and like Hunchback of Notre Dame came out when they did. I think that was the only era in time where those movies could have been released. Because yeah, you couldn't do. I don't even think you could do Hunchback nowadays because that seemed too dark back then, and now I think it would be like blasphemous, which is crazy. Yeah, Joe says, from what I've heard about the story, it seems to me that the film isn't even the way they were planning. That's the other thing. You can definitely tell, like I said, that they wanted some earlier version of this film was Snow White being way more of an activist. The rebellion against the queen was a much bigger deal. You can tell that movie is still kind of there, but they took out a lot of those elements for a lot of the traditional elements, and that the two trying to go together just doesn't work. GTF says they'll keep doing these remakes because it keeps their trademarks active. Yeah, but I think it also is ruining their brands. Like, I don't think little kids are going to go back to watch the original Snow White just because this movie is so bad. And even if they did like it, they probably wouldn't like the original because it's so different. So I don't even know if it's really helping the brands of these movies. Um, Prototype says the rebellious Snow White was done before and it was better in Mirror Mirror. I actually never saw Mirror Mirror, so I can't speak on that one. But that's it. That is my review on Snow White. Again, I would have gone way more traditional, way more accurate to the source material. I would have kept Someday My Prince Will Come and just make it more about like trying to escape loneliness, which I think would have been really relatable to a lot of people worldwide. And it would not have made it just about, oh, she wants romance and only that. Even though romance is not a bad thing, I think, again, I think there should have been more romance in this movie. I think the relationship between Snow White and an actual prince, not just some like Flynn Rider knockoff, would have been a lot better. Yeah, I think there was a lot of things that I would have changed in this movie, like a lot. I'll take a couple of comments and then I'll actually be done for today. JT Sains says, honestly, bring back Dark Disney. I want animated stories that treaded over heavy topics. Yeah, I would love that. Honestly, I think they would actually do well despite some initial controversy just because they'd be so fresh and different for Disney. But they don't have the balls to do that. I don't think we'd get anything like that until like Bob Iger left. They're definitely going to make a Frozen live action eventually, but they got to make their saga first. But yeah, anyway, that's it for today. That's my review. Thank you so much for coming. We'll talk more. I might even have another live stream because I only talked about Snow White today and there are other news that I didn't get to. So we might have another live stream even earlier this week, so make sure you follow me on Twitter and you keep an eye out on the community page for any announcements about that. But thank you guys for coming, and I'll see you guys next